In this documentary, we will interview Rabbinet Leah Yahonatan. In it, she will describe her journey to Judaism, which illustrates a common theme among members of this Black Jewish community. She describes Commandment Keepers Congregation in Harlem, New York, and its founder, Chief Rabbi W.A. Matthew. Rabbinet Yahonatan was his personal secretary. She was an officer of the congregation, and like her esteemed husband, Rabbi Yehoshua Yahonatan, she studied under Rabbi Matthew. In this interview, Rabbinet Yahonatan sheds light on the important roles that women played within this community. She also describes the history and nature of the relationship between Black Jews and white Jews in the New York area at this time. Her knowledge and expertise spans over 50 years and includes almost every major leader, congregation, and event that took place within their world during the second half of the 20th century. The interview was conducted on November 7th in the year 2000 by Rabbi Sholomo Levy at the historic Commandment Keepers Congregation. We were creating the first and largest collection of historical records about the Black Jewish Israelite community established by Rabbi Matthew in 1919. This collection, which includes many interviews, photographs, and records about several congregations, is available at the Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture. We pray that this interview captures some of the beauty, charm, intelligence, and spirit of this extraordinary person.
Shalom Aleichem. This is Rabbi Sholomo Levy, and I'm honored today to be with Rabbinet Leah Yahonatan, a very distinguished woman in our community. And she's going to tell us a little bit of her life from here at the historic Commandment Keepers Congregation in Harlem, New York, and which is November 7th, year 2000. Thank you for being with me, Rabbinet.
Thank you very much.
And you are a woman of valor in our community, and to be able to commit to history, some of your life experiences is really a treasure to the unity. So why don't you start by telling us when and where you were born?
Okay. Of course, I was born in the United States of America. I was actually born in Lawrenceburg, North Carolina, mainly by accident because my mother had traveled to the southern state at that time, just at the time when I was supposed to be born. She should really have stayed in the New York area, but she wanted to go south, and that's when I was born. In fact, I'm just 1 month away from my birthday, which will be December 7th, so that poses a great adventure in my life. Yes, I grew up in a very, very close-knitted family, and there were many of us. My parents had 6 boys, 2 girls. And my mother always used to say, since we were outnumbered from the male factor, that us women have to stick together. So I came up in a very strict religious, I need to raise it, home where prayers was always taught. At the dinner table, you never ate before saying prayers. You never went to bed before saying those prayers, and when you woke up, you sang those prayers. So it's an extension of a very close-knit, spiritual life, which today I'm very happy for that, because it led my way into being very active in our great community. I attended schools, of course, in the New York area, particularly in the Brooklyn area. Where did your family move to New York? Well, my family had already been in New York when I was born. They just went back for a vacation. My parents came to New York in, I guess, the year 1923. And you were born, and I was born in 1926.
26.
I'm good. So that's a long time.
So they were really in New York.
They were really in New York. And
so you grew up in...
Actually grew up in
New York.
Yes. Attended schools in the New York area, particularly in the Brooklyn area. High school in Brooklyn, New York. At that time, it was called Girls Commercial High School, where I graduated from. and then went into college. I attended New York University School of Commerce, taking a business course, and went on to further studies in various institutions. I also studied the religious side, or Hebraic studies came a little later in life. But prior to that, I studied the various religions, the great religions of the world. So that my background came with that. My father was very active in religious work, particularly in his house of worship. He was superintendent of schools, so naturally we all had to have a strong biblical education. That was a necessity for the superintendent of schools. And not the secular school, but the religious school.
What religious schools?
Yes, he was connected with the Antioch Tabernacle School, religious school. It goes back in 1923, 1924, 25, 26.
What denomination was that in?
Yes, that was really the ancient Baptist religion, because out of that they believe strongly in the Old Testament, the Old Testament believers, so that strong, background came up in us. And as we grew, of course, the congregation changed. Some went strictly into the Baptist faith, and those of us who were strongly in the Old Testament went into the Old Testament faith, which ultimately became the Hebraic old life. So that's how we came into that. I studied under various teachers of high standing. I studied Black history under Professor Dr. Wilkins at that time, who was the professor at the New School of Research. That's what it's called now. I also studied religious topics, studies at various other, religious institutions. And my main course in life was to get a very deep knowledge in the different religions of the world. And as I studied, I saw how very, very much the Black, I may use word Black because I want to say the African American which they use today, was so close related to the ancient Israelites. And that history is what I followed. In the year, I think it was 1950, we were married in Rabbi Yahonatan.
When you say we,
oh, okay. No, I'm going.
I know what you're talking about.
Yes, you know I'm talking about Rabbi Yahonatan. Yes. And we were.
When and how did you?
Yes. We met also at a youth conference. We were at a youth conference. I belonged to at that time to a singing group, and we were called, I forgot the name of it now, but we all sang. And that's where I met Rabbi Yahonatan. We were at a youth gathering. We're always at youth gatherings. And he says, oh, I like the way she sings. So he wanted to meet this person who sang. Of course, that person was me. So we didn't meet. At first, I thought it was just a meeting. A young man wanted to meet someone who could sing. But then, of course, it developed, and eventually we did get married in 1950. 1950, we were married. And that went on. Eventually, I began to study the Hebrew language under one of the teachers that studied under the late Rabbi W. Matthews, and also Mother Yehudet, who was an expert in the language. Mother Yehudet that's come under also with the late Rabbi W. Matthews of the Commandment Keepers Hebrew Congregation. Again, my name was, my teacher instructor at that time was a Rabbi Yahonatan. That was very fluent in the Hebrew, and I was her first student, and leading up to coming under the whole teacher's course.
And where did you meet these women teachers?
Yes, these women teachers were met at conferences. Met them at conferences. I attended a lot of conferences.
Religious?
Yes, religious conferences. I was always a religious conference, representing the youth of our community. And there I met women of high knowledge and professional women in their field. And one person in particular was at that conference, and that was Rabbi Yahonatan. And eventually...
Her name again is...
Yes, Miriam Johnson was an English name, but her Hebraic thing, Rabbi Yahonatan. Maria Rabbi Yahonatan, yes. And that's where I got the deep book.
As a she is the person who invited you to come to Commandment Keepers for the first time?
And yes, she was the one to invite me the first time to come to Commandment Keepers. And that goes back, and I think it was 1960, 1961 in that area. And I've been in that this community, I would say, for all those years. Growing up under the late W. Wentworth A. Matthews, in the school, I attended the Ethiopian Hebrew Rabbinical. It's not the Ethiopian Rabbinical College. At that time, it was Rabbinical College. It was not the Israelite Rabbinical College. It was Ethiopian Hebrew Rabbinical College. That's right. And that's where we attended for 7 years, because it was an evening course, and we took 7 years of training, very deep training, and eventually graduating from that, also being, I guess you could call it, an anointing by the late Chief Rabbi as a revivalist in the House of Israel, and a teacher and a revivalist to revive the nation, to bring them back to the true knowledge of our God.
Yes. Now, in these early experiences, both at the New York University and pursuing your education, and with your other siblings, what was it like for a woman at that time? And were there many other, particularly women of color, pursuing degrees in the areas that you were, institutions that you were in, and how did you feel?
Yes, there were women of color. It was very difficult in those days, much more than now, because I think in the early 30s, 40s, I came into the college in 45, 46, because I graduated from high school in 1944, and then went to school. At that time, we did not have as many women of color in the college level as you have today, because the opportunity today is greater. And we were in the pioneer years of bringing our women more exposure for a higher education, you see. And that many times even I was discouraged from even taking the kind of course I wanted to take. And I remember one of the teachers saying to my father, in high school, that he would be doing me an injustice to put me in a commercial class, because there would not be jobs for, black women. That's what she really said at that time. But of course, knowing what we knew, and also being a family of strong structure, knowing our history, only gave us the impetus to go even further, knowing that one day that the women, and particularly the women of color, would be in the forefront.
And all your many brothers,
yes,
did they pursue the same course, or did you excel?
Yes, no, my brothers went into different fields. Some of them went into the service, and others took different courses. That were in electricity and electrical field. Some went into construction engineers, so they also had a very full, educational background.
But you would say your parents encouraged you equally, male and female, right?
Equally male and female. Equally, they encouraged the female as well as the male, because my father would always say, you need an educated mother to guide the children, because he always used to say the hand that rocks the cradle rules the world also. So if your mother was educated, the children would be much better educated. They would have a better family structure, and this is how we came up in a very large family, very close knitted, and also wanting everyone to have a better education.
And you were influenced by a lot of female teachers at these conferences and other places. Did that influence you or shape you in some way, seeing women in roles of authority and respect?
That's what I think. Yes, it did influence me. And not only that, studying the great women of the Torah, great women of the Bible, how they also were instrumental in saving the house of Israel. How we have the mother Deborah, how we had Deborah, yes, and how we had the Huldah, who saved the house, and just all of the great women that were mentioned in the Torah and in the Bible, that get really the feeling gift is that you need to go further, that we are great people.
Now, as the women in the Hebrew community, Mother Johnson, Mother Judith, as they instructed you in even more of an Old Testament teaching, and then ultimately brought you into the current state that you have as a Hebrew Israelite, How did your father react or feel about that interpretation of scripture when you, how did you explain it to him and your mother, and how did they react?
No, it wasn't necessary to explain to my father because he understood, because he knew I was always a person searching and studying religion, so he knew that was it. But he always said that we were spiritual Jews or spiritual Hebrews because we were the ancient people of the Bible. So that didn't, it wasn't foreign for him to know that we were going in that direction. In fact, I think he encouraged that because his last days on earth, he was very much into our congregation, always attending our services and saying to the rabbi at that time, as he sat under him, in Graham doing great work, and he would always be willing to be there on time for the service, and when anyone come late, he would wonder, why are you so late? The service began at 10, so we were a little more strict than that, than the rabbi was. But no, he was not against, because he felt as long as you were worshiping God, the creator of the universe, you were on the right track. You see, he wasn't really.
So he respected you.
He respected, yes, very much so, yes. And also our mother respected that because they were people on a spiritual background, and if their children could develop themselves on a spiritual level, then they knew that they were well on their way from making good citizens in any nation, any country.
Now, in the Ethiopian Hebrew Medical College at that time, were there many other women students?
There were, in the beginning, there were, in the class that I attended, there were two others besides myself. Do you remember they were? At this time, I would have to, I know Maureen Wells came up a little later. She was in the class. I think I was 2 years advanced before she came into class. Yes. And then we had another professor who also studied along with us. I lost to bring her name right now, but there was another that came out at the same time that there was.
And what was the teacher's course? What were the courses like?
And just goes
Down to curriculum and assignments?
Yes. Basically, we studied the Bible and all its contents, and then also Torah, commentaries, any subject that would lead to the knowledge of the real house of Israel, like House of Israel. Not just Torah per se, but also other books that would emphasize and also give great credit to the writings. See, like other books that we studied from. We can not just and some say we didn't study Talmud, and in instances we did study Talmud. Sure, we studied the ethics of others, things like that. We studied other languages. We had a little bit of Greek because we had to interpret some of the works that we were studying, the basic portion of that, in order to get a deeper understanding of how the religions tied in together and their influence, or great influence on other nations. So because we don't round it.
As you said, it mainly met in the evening?
Yes, it was an evening courses because many of us worked when we could not afford to go in the daytime. Of course, we didn't have the luxury of having as many different grants and things offered to us in those days as you have today. And that's why I encourage young people today to really get an education, because you have a golden opportunity, because we really had to work in order to put ourselves through school. The grants were not given to us as they are today, and those, especially the males that came out of service, were given the opportunity to go to school, get higher education, so they would have the GI rights, which gives them more funds to work when you get a better education. But I worked, even the secular phases of my education was done mainly in an evening setting because of working during the day, and it was accomplished.
Where did you work?
Oh, yeah, I went into the federal government at an early age. I came out of high school. I wasn't quite 16, so I had to get my parents' permission to go to work. I began in the federal government, and I worked for military intelligence. I worked in many areas of federal government. In fact, I had 29 years of federal service in various fields, and also a number of years, about 6 or 7 years in state service. During my stay in federal service, I worked with agencies where I did interagency coordination. I worked in various entities of the government, which was Treasury Department. So my background really is federal employee as a career employee, and getting a very deep knowledge. In fact, when I was in the Treasury government and I was in the Region 2, we had the responsibility for Puerto Rico, New Jersey, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, New York. That was called the Region 2, so that gave me opportunity to go to other areas within that region, like it's a conference or something of that sort. I grew up in, I would say, the grassroots, because I started in the clerical field with my living up, also to administrator.
Now you were married, working outside the home, and going to school days and evenings sometimes. Was that unusual for?
No, it wasn't unusual. It wasn't unusual for many of us, because that was the way we had to do it. In the earlier days, in the 50s and 60s, after we had the civil rights movement, of course, many other areas were opened up where many could go during the day and complete your studies at a much quicker pace. But in the days before that civil rights movement, we were at a disadvantage somewhat, because we had to go mainly evenings if you could not afford to go to school. Of course, there were schools who had go where you would not have to pay as much as you would if you weren't going, evenings, and you would get some credit for that. But no, it was a bigger promotion.
In the ETLB, you went to college at the time. There were other women and went on faculty teaching different courses. Did Rabbinet give them the same degrees?
No, the women received the teacher's degree. You're going to the field of teaching. And there were those who were inspired, more spiritually inspired, and he would ordain them as revivalists. And I may be, at this moment, the only revivalist that was ordained by him living today. You're right.
And how did you feel, or other women feel, about the roles that they were given in terms of as teachers and revivalists, and not as rabbis?
God, we did not feel that the title rabbi belonged to us, because our teaching was that more of the rabbinate as a part of the Levitical priesthood, and in the Levitical priesthood there were no females. So we took the role of teachers as things very honored for us. Of course, today is a different story. The women's lib and all, the new progressive methods within the area of women. But we did not feel that it was anything demeaning to be a teacher. In fact, that was a great privilege. And we realized that because we were able to teach, and in order to teach, we were going to build a better community, we're going to build a better spiritual guardian people, because we were the women who had the inspiration to teach. We had the title behind us to teach, and we went further in our secular world. Those who were teaching from a spiritual sense or religious sense also went into the teaching field, in the secular world. So bad to know, we did not feel, and we did not at that time want to be rabbis, because we felt that belonged to the biblical priesthood for the males. Of course, today you have women who feel that women should be rabbis, not so much in the Hebrew Israelite community or the Black Hebrew community, but you find a lot of that in the Black Jewish community.
What do you think about that?
I still would have some reservations for that, because I feel, maybe because my background is strongly structured on that, the Asian Torah teachings. Maybe that's why I feel that way. I feel that women not necessarily be rabbis, but they would be great teachers. Someone else might have a difficult training at that, and that's the way it is. Because of a certain purity in a woman's life that she would denote, and mostly, and that's my reason for that. Not necessarily dependent of the entire people community, parts of women at the same.
In addition to the medical college, were you involved in other auxiliaries or organizations or committees within the congregation? And
Yes, within the congregation, well, of course, the women's auxiliary to the Hebrew council came with, the rabbinical council came in with the council. But prior to that, yes, we had the sisterhood movements in our various congregations, and I belonged to not congregations, but groups outside. For a small time, I was a part of the Hadassah movement in our Queens area. So we worked with the Hadassah, I worked with the schools.
I want to hear about that, particularly the Hadassah movement, but particularly within Commandment Keepers, I believe they had an organization called the Royal Order.
Yes.
That is the Indian Blues.
Right.
What was that auxiliary about?
Yeah. The Royal Order of Ethiopian Hebrews, Sons and Daughters of Culture, it was a fraternal organization. It's similar to many other fraternal organizations, like you have the Eastern Stars, and you had a big, among the men, the Mason Masonic Order. It was of that nature. And yes, and there were the Daughters of Israel, which I belonged to, but part of that fraternal organization. In many areas, they would call them secret organizations, but it's only secret to those who are not inside of the organization. Of course, there are certain things that are taught in that fraternal.
How did one get into the Royal Order? So you had the congregation Commandment Keepers,
Yes,
and one could be a member of the congregation,
but not necessarily a member of, yes,
of the Royal Order.
yes, it was some selection. Selection, yes. It was through selection, and the character of the individual was taken into consideration, their devotion to their community was taken into consideration. Of course, the spiritual level played a high part in that selection. They're very selective of who went into the fraternal organizations, especially into Orlando and whose sons and daughters of culture, mainly selected by those who are higher into the order, and you would have to be recommended by one who's already in the order.
And what could you reveal or tell us about the type of things you would do within the order and the type of things you would study or ceremonies that would take place?
Yes, of course, we were taught we would, if there was a priest like passed in order, of course, there were certain things we would do. You know, we would see also, we were a part of what we would call a Catholic tradition today, to see that when one had passed away, what rights were given to that individual if they were members of that order. There were certain rights that went with that. We felt we were the persons who had to instruct. If I was a daughter at the House of Israel, or mother in the House of Israel, I would have to be emulating this within our congregation to other women in the congregation. That I would have to set that example as a member of the Royal Order, sons and daughters culture, and as a daughter or mother of the House of Israel, I would be responsible for seeing the spiritual development of the women and the daughters in the congregation. And eventually, those whom we felt would make a good representative for our order, and we would approach them, and they would be recommended. Of course, they would have to go through certain initiations, to prove that they were the person of the individual that could be in that society.
And this was also integrated with anyone in
Yes.
involved with what you you mentioned the sisterhood. What kind of things were the sisterhood responsible for?
Yes, the sisterhood was responsible for making sure that our not necessarily sanctuary, but our temples were kept in good order. The sisterhood would be responsible for promoting fundraising activities so that the community would be viable as far as being able to keep our buildings, etc., in shape. The sister would be responsible for meeting with other women of other congregations, because we tried to see that every congregation had a sisterhood. And we would also attend conferences or conventions situated around the women, situations that affected women in our community. We would also attend those, conferences. And even as the Women's Council, we would do that also in the community at large, not necessarily the great community, but we would be representative in the community as Hebrew women and of the Royal Order, or of the Women's Council, or of the various sisterhoods within the congregations.
Now, you mentioned the Hadassah payment, which is a organization primarily European.
Yes,
Jewish women, the address so that you were involved with
them. Yes.
What was your experience there like?
Well, the experience there was that because our children attended a community where it really was mixed. We were in the Queens, Laurelton area, and where we became honorary members of the Hadassah, because we were to also be active in their fundraiser, and on that time to lecture to the Hadassah women, want to pioneer women's from Harlem would be lectured to us, lecturing to various women organizations, so that there was that honorary membership there with them. And we did have a few of our community, women of our community, Egypt who were members, active full-fledged members of the Hadassah group.
Do you remember where they were?
Yes, they were in Laurelton, and I think it was Rabbi McLeod's daughters. What their name was now. Well, such things, I'm not too sure that they were. It was their children went to school with our children in the Laurelton area.
And the congregation, is that the Laurelton Jewish Center?
Yeah, Laurelton Jewish Center, yes. And within that area there, we're very active in the years.
And how were you received as a black woman within this community at these Hadassah gatherings?
Very well received. Very well received, because they are children were then involved with their community because they were attending their schools. And we were active with their communities also. We were very active with the schools because with their major fundraiser, we were part of that, because our children at that time were getting scholarships. In order to get the scholarship, we had to work along with them so that our children would get that dual education, the Hebrew education as well as the secular. And we were very active with them, making sure that there was enough finances to merit them continuing in that vein of like cycle.
These day schools?
Day schools, they were day schools, yes, and a few of them were in yeshivas, but our children were mainly in the day school. The day school comprised mostly the conservative concept of Judaism, whereas the yeshivas are more or less the orthodox concept. And then you had some reforms. Mainly our children came up under the Stalin Shepti concept, which was conservative, and some of them came out of the yeshiva, which was the orthodox setting. I were instrumental in getting many of our students from the Hebrew community into the Hebrew day schools, and there came the mentor for many of them, and the overseer going into the schools where an issue or problem came up. I was there to address the needs of that and to make sure that our children were not being mentally deprived.
Could you elaborate?
Yes, that if our children attended the Hebrew day school or Jewish school, if you want to say, that they were not going to be ostracized in that school, that they were going to be well respected in that school, and I remember on one occasion, and the Ethiopians, there was this terrible starvation going on in Ethiopia, and one of the students there at that time made a remark to one of our students saying, "You're like the Ethiopian skinny," they make some remarks like that. I did not stop with the child to say that. I went to the headmaster of the school, and I said to the headmaster of the school, "I want to see him. It's a very urgent thing. It seemed very minor, but it's a very urgent to me. It was, now you're playing with the next sport." faculty, of our students. And I said, it's incumbent upon you and the staff to make sure that every child in this institution knows the plight of our students, coming from a country that's devastated because of starvation, as you would also want each student in here to remember the Holocaust, and they will talk about that. So it's incumbent upon you and the staff to make sure that the students understand the appointed period in which our people also established.
Yes. Now, what schools were these?
Okay, these were schools in our eastern area of Long Island. This was Warren Cedar, very secret in there. Solomon Schechter, that's in that area. And then later on, also, some of them went into the Westchester Solomon Schechter school system in White Plains. So there was this continuity of them getting the education. And then finally, after graduating, going into institutions of higher learning where they wished to go.
Did you ever have problems getting students into the schools or them being accepted, or questions about their Jewishness?
No. I can only remember one occasion, but no, because many of the headmasters of the school knew of Rabbi Matthew and his works, and he knew also of the Ethiopian Hebrew community, and we represented that community because many of them had visited our congregation, and they knew about us, so that I really didn't have a problem. Just that going in them, most of our children already had the background in Hebrew language, because they started in the Cheder, because we all had Cheders, these are classes where the children come after school and learn Hebrew, and if they needed help in reading or arithmetic when you're reading, this would be given to them. In fact, we had a Cheder, or Talmud, if you want to call it that, afternoon class for our children. Say they might come and get help for their Hebrew lessons if they needed that, and get help for their secular studies if they needed this, so that they were well-rounded. And they also saw that our children had the development for being good students in that school, were helped really escalate the school itself. So we really didn't have a problem, with the exception of one. There was one case where I tried to get a child into the school of Hebrew background, but they had come out of another religious setting, and that had somewhat influenced their way of behavior in the school, and they did not want to accept the child at that time because of the previous background and what they had narrated under a different religious setting, came out of different schools.
How did the children themselves feel about being in this environment in the schools that they attended?
They had no problem because many of them started school in that setting. So they were conditioned to it. They knew that, and in many instances they might have been the only one in their class, but they got along with the students. In fact, I could say, and one of the students, and I could say that because it was my niece, they considered her the head of the class. So when she was absent, everybody was sort of down. And when she came to school, she came into the room, and I brought her in there, and all the students stood up and clapped, and they no longer paid attention to what the teacher said. They were looking at the board. Now she was back. So the teacher wrote a note to my sister saying, it would be nice if you would tell the board that I am the teacher of the class. And you see, they didn't have a trouble with that.
Yeah, you mentioned before.
Yeah.
Do you remember discuss things of some of the other students you remember who attended this school?
But how should somebody eat the board?
With the yodeler.
Until such well, I get the back there, the red fish, Sholomo or Cal, many of the other children in the Larton students did, yes, this Jewish, it was kids. I can't remember the last names now, but they were we had many of them, we had those that came from the St. Albans area that they went into the school system. Yes, and the children whose name I don't remember now, the Josephs, their children were in that school, Mordecai Joseph's children were in that school. And yes, Hawkins, his son was in that school, sure. We got many of the students coming from St. Albans, Cambridge Heights, Warrenton area into the schools, into the north.
Now, with the were these efforts connected with the Hansa Abishon movement, or were they similar or separate, or did you have any involvement with the
Hunter Harishon, as the Hunter Harishon mainly was connected with the congregation in the Bronx, and that's Mount Horeb. But yet, many of the children did participate with them. We did not encourage our children too much because on a Shabbat they would go on trips and we sort of discouraged that. But no, the Harishon did bring on a good relationship with the younger members of our community and theirs.
What was your what were your recollections of that effort, the Hansa Abishon effort, in terms of how it came about, how it functioned, and people involved with it?
Well, the people involved with it were members of our community too, and mainly from the Mount Horeb congregation. They were the main focus of the Hansa Harishon, and they worked with the children, getting them into the summer camps. Been involved with the summer camps, which was good. Mainly with the summer camps, and some of them perhaps going through the school system too, in day schools. But mainly our children were not a full part of it, but that one particular congregation was in Mount Horeb. And yes, in our community, it's mainly we had our own activities in our community, and our congregation is located in the St. Albans area. We had our own after-school activities because we had the basketball classes and tournaments with our youth. We had tennis for the girls. We had, of course, Hebrew classes. We did a lot of special programs in our community. In fact, our congregation, which has been, I feel, participated in one of the largest feeding programs, special feeding programs, summer feeding programs, in the Southeast Queens area. We were sponsoring, we would so-sponsor in the Queens area in the summer food program. And one of the top 3 organizations we were our own sponsors. We had, in fact, was director over in our congregation, had responsibility for over 63 sites. And we had a budget of over $500,000, so that we had a very viable program going for many years. We had a major fundraising program to address the needs of our congregation. We did one at Bingo, which was a major fundraiser, and I think we were the only Black, maybe Hebrew congregation or organization that was their own, sponsor of that major fundraising activity. We were involved in that. We're involved in programs within our community which gave employment to many youths. We had a youth employment program, which we got many of the youths off the street in the summertime. They were involved and kept very busy. We kept our students very busy because we felt if we kept them busy, this was a way of deterring them against getting into any kind of, after-school activities which weren't good for them to that school. So, yes, we were involved in quite a bit. We also served on the Queens Passover Committee, making sure that all the families were in need of Passover time received the Passover, baskets, etc. But we did extensive traveling. We traveled all over with the late Rabbi Leah, gave us lectures inside of the United States and out of the United States. We Canada and abroad. Lecturing on the relationship of the Black Hebrews, the other Hebrews, Hamasha Hebrews, to world Jewry. And that he did for many years, telling the story of our relationship to world Jewry, of our relationship as people of the book. The true people of the book, and this is what we believe. And this is the story that we told in the chapter. And of course, today, we have many other organizations that are now on the scene, who are also doing a very good work. We have the Israelite Rabbinical Academy, which the Rabbi Yahonatan and myself have been instrumental in teaching and bringing up some very fine rabbis. We have also the Ethiopian Hebrew Israelite Rabbinical Council, who also has a seminary, but they will also train rabbis. We have the council that will address the needs and the concerns and the issues of concerns that here develop in our community. and its relationship to the community at large.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm going to want you to talk more about those two, the council and the Israeli Biblical Academy. But a lot of the activities you just described were part of a congregation that you and your husband founded called Be'at Yisila.
That is true.
I think you mentioned that
Yes.
briefly in passing,
Right.
but I wanted to go into a little bit history of Be'at Yisila, and that obviously would have to connect with the ordination
Change.
of your husband. So you mentioned that you had met earlier. You both came to Commandment Keepers at the same time.
Yes.
So you met Mother Johnson. She invited you,
And
and then you invited
the rabbi.
the rabbi, who would become the rabbi.
The rabbi. Yes,
Okay.
my husband would be on the rabbi.
Tell us a little bit about that
Yes.
process.
Yes, because we both attended the school together. We both studied under the late Rabbi Matthews in this school and the college, as I said, did them for college, and then we graduated. After graduating, and Rabbi Yahonatan remained here for a while.
So
Yes,
you,
after
and
graduating,
then from the first time you invited him to come, after you had come,
after I come, like
and you liked what you saw,
came upon this.
and then were you married at that time yet?
Yes, we
You
were
were
married.
already married.
We were already married, yes.
So you told him about the synagogue.
Yes.
What was his reaction?
His reaction at first was he would bring me, and then he'd go home and come back and pick me up again. And I says, while you're doing all that, you might as well come and listen to the service. And he did one Shabbat. He liked it, and he stayed to become the rabbi. Yes, and we did attend the school, spending us at 7 years there together.
You were in the right at the same time.
At the same time, we were at the same time. But he also had further study as a rabbi, and what we, committed to the rabbi, the rabbinate, that perhaps he as a teacher would not have had. So we have further private studies, I would stay with the rabbi. That's right. But yes, and as a result of that, the Be'at Tefillah, Ethiopic Hebrew congregation came into being. And I think it was in the year 1973. So in Israel, I have to, no, that's not true. Yes, 1973. He's actually found. Yes, and the
And how did you come about the idea
Yes,
for
that
it was a thing, I guess.
yes, he was the first in Rabbi Matthew's time. First, there was the graduation, and then 1 year later, you were ordained. So after the ordination, perhaps maybe 1 year after the ordination, maybe a couple of years after the ordination, the need was to have a congregation in the Queens area because we lived in the Queens area. There were many families in the Queens area. And so the idea of establishing a congregation came into being. And the congregation had its beginnings in our home in Cambria Heights, and that's where we first established the Be'at Tefillah, the people congregation as before.
Tell us about that. I'm going to have to turn the tape in just a minute. See, it's almost at the end here. I was a recording tape, but how did you get the idea? I guess the idea that there needed to be a congregation.
Yes, because of the number of factors.
And it was supposed to be any of the plan. Okay, we'll take a break just for a moment. Slip it. That's it. Yeah, that's this. Oh, it was 2 o'clock. It's almost 2.
Oh, that's an hour. That's
I don't know. But you have your.
no.
Yeah, it's a quarter to 2.
Quarter to 2. Yes, we have 15. We got to be it. We'll have 15 more minutes.
Okay, and then we'll just
2 o'clock. I said we cut it.
yeah. Okay, and then 2 will stop wherever we are at that point.
Yes.
So just getting to the founding of the Tefillah.
Yes, Be'at Tefillah was founded. There were 10 families that began.
Do you remember just some of the founding families?
Came. There's some of the families were the Briston family, of course the Yahonatan family, the Briston family, the Smith family, the Johnston family, everybody, and US. Different others fact, but there were 10 families came together. The Carter provided that. That's the mother. Coming to Grand's easy.
And you first started meeting at your home.
But then by the first meeting was in our home, and then we felt the need to expand. So we went searching for a building, and the building really was found by Imad Briston and myself. We were walking along the boulevard there, and we saw this building, yes, Linton in walking this area, and we saw this building, and we looked, this was like a beautiful temple. And he said, because we took them all into Levy there, and we just envisioned how it would look. That was a brick building, it was very beautiful. And it had a sign for sale. So we ran back and we got the number again, and we contacted persons who selling the building, and that's how we got the building. We did purchase that building and made it into a beautiful temple where we had rooms upstairs. We had what you understand how they made in that area. Our sanctuary, the library, the children's room, just ideal for our community. And that's where we also ran our special programs in the community, because then we had a base.
And this was in St. Albans, right? The year was about
from 1973. Hatfield is still in existence.
Yeah. So 73 was the year that Rabbi Matthews had passed away.
Yeah, he may have.
We started
before. He was ill at the time. We did stop that. He was, because he was not able to attend actually.
Yeah. Now you mentioned that you would speak to many of them as we were travel.
Oh yes.
What was your relationship to Rabbi Matthews and your role in assisting him by helping him?
Okay. At that time, I was the secretary to the congregation, and I was also the secretary to Rabbi Matthews. He was in answering and, doing most of his work when he was requested to speak out. And he was on a lecture bureau, and he had made lectures, and this biographical sketch would have to be sent out. I would just, do all the necessary work as far as affecting that travel was concerned, and also responsible also to see that everything governing the synagogue was intact. When that our temple would run as second to none as far as order was concerned.
How did Rabbi Matthews feel about you starting the congregation?
At that time he was elated at that there was another congregation. And he was not able to attend because at that time he was hospitalized. But many of the members of the congregation came, and they went back and they told him, and he said from Hashem, he was very happy that he was able to erect another temple. It was Bet Hatfilah, named after the first Bet Hatfilah, organized by the late Rabbi W. Matthews. He continued with that name as a branch from this great work.
As part of both your work within Commandment Keepers and a lot of the work on the Baptist English, you worked with a lot of the Ashkenazi European congregations and rabbis. Can you just mention briefly some of the congregations and rabbis you've worked with over the years you had relationships with?
Okay, there was Rabbi Farhi, who was a very close friend to Rabbi Yahonatan. There were
the congregation.
Yes.
What congregation was he with?
Yes, he really was with the New Jersey congregation, but they would often attend Sephardic conferences together. And he was very instrumental in our congregation getting a beautiful Torah. It was through his efforts that we were able to get a beautiful Sefer Torah into our Tibet. Also, we worked with the various rabbis in the Queens area, especially because we were involved with the schools. There was Rabbi from the Larton Jewish Center. We knew all of the rabbis and had a good working relationship with most of the rabbis in the Queens area. And also by lecturing, we became more knowledgeable to many rabbis. It was a more difficult task penetrating the Orthodox, community than with the conservative and the Reformed. But then eventually the Orthodox community began to accept many of our students that we related to them that wanted the Orthodox setting, because Gurney Johnson had wanted his daughter to attend an Orthodox setting. We were instrumental in getting her into that Brooklyn Orthodox setting. So that then we were beginning to get the good working relationship with the entire community. Not saying that all of us, peaches and creams is not always, but we had to build our reputation in this respect, and to show that our students were and could learn as well as any others, and were going to be very beautiful students in any school, would be an asset to any school.
And when did you move the congregation to Mount Vernon?
Yes, our congregation moved to Mount Vernon, and I think it was 1978. Went there because we had, at that time, established our, living quarters there, and we had ample space to house a congregation again, and we felt the need to be there. And there also developed another congregation came under the auspices of the council and Rabbi Yahonatan. So that community there began to grow. The Hebrew, and at that time we even called it the Hebrew Israelite community, began to come very much into focus there and making a stronger community and doing great things there also.
And with these congregations, your role then became not only as a teacher, which you had been made under Rabbi Matthews, but now you were the rabbinate of the congregation, Oli Bitson, when they're sending out new congregation. What is the role of the rabbinate in the congregation?
The rabbinate is really the wife of a rabbi. But as the wife of a rabbi, she must also maintain a certain stability in her community. She must also be a willing knowledge. She was also mentored. She must know all the tenets of our way of life that governs women and the house of Israel. So she becomes the strong arm to the rabbi and to the congregation. And her sole purpose is to build that congregation, to build that community, to work with the women of the community and the congregation, so that the women of our congregation and our community will stand shoulder to shoulder with any women. In fact, we should be with the light of the community. We feel that we should be exemplary in everything we do, and that we should be of high character and moral standards.
For the role of the rabbinate, is it simply an honorary role that she is by marriage related to the rabbi, or does she have an active voice and role and activities within the congregations?
Both. She has an active role, and in many instances a voice. Most of the rabbinites, or the wives of the rabbis, are women also high character. Since they set the example, many of the women of the congregation will go to her for advice. Or if they will not approach the rabbi, they will go to the rabbinate. And so if they go to the rabbinate, they will also reach the rabbi because they are best to go to the rabbi. But see, and the wife of the rabbi should be one who will stand very strong in the community and whose voice should be recognized. Not necessarily that she would get on the paper to perform, but that she must be there for that structure if he needs it to keep that congregation in full balance of peace, of shalom. See, and
so within the Israelite community, the rabbi's wife, a rabbinite or Bitson, is a very vocal, visible,
yes,
very strong and respected individual. Very much one of the most respected individuals in the congregation.
Should be one of the most. And there are mothers in the congregation too. And eventually she will take on the mother role, because as she progresses in age, automatically she will be not only the wife of the rabbi, but in many instances she becomes the mother of the congregation, if they don't, address another as mother of the congregation. But she, in essence, will also become the mother of the congregation too, by reason of age. And also, she will always be being, I don't like to say number one, but that's really what it amounts to, the number one person in the congregation of female structure. She should always be in the forefront of seeing that everything goes well, if possible, in that congregation. And if not, try to devise a ways and means by calling a meeting with the women of the congregation. If there needs to be an issue to be addressed among women, then she should be made a part of that, to see that, the peace will come in the conversation.
As you wind up, I know there's so much more to talk about, but to talk about your role within the community as a high respect that people have for that. How did your friends and neighbors outside the community, co-workers, how did they react to you as a black woman in the Jewish faith?
Very, very well. because many of them would come to me, and the fact I sort of became a role model in their eyes too. Because if they had an issue or concerning women, they would come to me because I'm always a vocal person or fighting for the rights of women, and so they can come to me. I sit on many advisory boards. I work in our community. I sit on advisory boards governing family care. I sit on advisory boards as a national
one that you've been involved with for a long time.
Yes, I've been involved with the family care program for many years, and I sit on a commissioner's advisory board at the state of New York. I also sit on an advisory board for a national adult family organization in the United States of America. I also sit on local boards and also the president of local chapters of a national board, so that my involvement in the secular world is very great also. And whenever I've just completed a lecture at a national conference, which took place in Philadelphia, and I spoke on ethnic diversity, the difference between the ethnic groups as it involves our work, and as it involves us as a people. Knowing that the so-called minority are becoming a majority in our country, that perhaps in the year 2005, and this has been made statistics, that in the year 2005, only 55% of our population will be white, and the other percentage will be people of darker skin. So that to know ethnic diversity is a very high concern of us as women and mothers, but also as people of color, that eventually we will have to take high places in our society.
How long, you say, with 2000, how long would you say you've been involved in children care, foster care? I know that you've been very active in adoption of mentally retarded children. How long would you say?
27 years. 27 years in the care programs, yes. And also recruiting other families into programs, and also outreach, because there are many in our community, when I'm saying our community, the African American community, who have not been reached yet. So there's an outreach to reach these persons and individuals who need this help to come under some structure where they can get the necessary help that they need.
When you interact with people in those fields and they discover that you are in the Jewish faith, how did they react, both black people and white people, to black people who are Jewish? What has been kind of your...
They react very well, because I was asking before, Mrs. Yahonatan, could you please get her to come? As there's an issue and a concern, they react very well too. And if you mention my name, I guess they would all know, because I'm always there to try to help save the program and make it viable in our community. See that the necessary resources are there, and they do a good job, and that these individuals whom we serve, like you well served, and make good citizens of special.
And so you notice that there's been a great conflict to a certain extent of being black and being Jewish. I'm sure you've been asked that many times before.
But no, I have not found it to be a conflict, because now I think that the nation...
Unfortunately, the tape ended at this point, but not before she had given us a wealth of information. May the spirit of Rabbinet Leah Yahonatan be for a blessing to all future generations. Amen.